I used to give tours, and this was our favorite room in the house. And people would walk into this room and the breath would be taken away right immediately. So one of the things that I love to point out is that Frank Lloyd Wright liked to use repeating geometry and symmetry. So like this part of the window is the same size as this part of the light on the
exactly the same
R-class window.
size. Wow.
Yep. And then this part of the fixture has a repeating, has a matching shape as well. And what happens when you walk into this room, there's this repetition of pattern to design. Frank Lloyd Wright said that created a rhythm in a building like a piece of music. And so even as a kid, going through this house, they didn't know why it was so beautiful, but it was just these patterns and these shapes, and it's this balance and the harmony, and that's why this house was so amazing. Other thing that I love to show the kids is that here, what in the this like breakfast nook, is that you have a very low ceiling and you have high chairs. And in this part, you have low chairs and a very high ceiling. So this area in the breakfast nook creates its own separate space by having these very high chairs and the low ceiling. And just little details like that really divide this wonderful room together in pieces. Now, when we lived here, these were little cactus gardens that my mom, because she figured that's the one thing she can't really kill, and we had a cat that you would go to the bathroom and get, whatever is those thorns in his rear end every single time. It was unbelievable. Never learned a lesson there. And then finally here too is that I love to show that he, instead of just having a box of a room, he has all these really interesting shapes. So you can see that these windows are looking outside, and then these windows here are looking into the other room. And then if you turn over here, these windows are fascinating. You are literally inside the house, looking outside the house, looking inside the house, looking outside the house.
Yeah. So when you're talking to all those architecture guys about this kind of stuff, like how do they analyze this? Because this is not a feature that you see in any house, any place else, where you have this really meta window effect. What do those architecture guys make of something like this?
Well, are people willing to spend the kind of money for these extra details nowadays? Because sometimes things are done so quickly and you want to be efficient. And they would say, why would you want to put all these extra angles in this house? And that one thing was fascinating about this house is that Edward Boyton gave Frank Lloyd Wright pretty much an unlimited budget. So this house was $55,000, and that translates to like about $1.4 million in today's dollars. But can you imagine in 1908? That was a staggering sum.
Yeah.
So
and it paid off.
It paid off. It paid off, and it's still. If you think about this house, how contemporary it looks compared to everything else on the street.
Yeah.
And it still looks contemporary. It still looks like it was a house of the future.
Yeah.
And considering how.
And that's one of the things that I thought when I first came in here is, first of all, there's just nothing else like it, but it still feels, there's such like this fresh impression when you come in here. And one thing I really loved about what you said is, I wasn't able to put my finger on it, but I love that word rhythm, because me being a music guy, there is an incredible logic, and there's like the repetition motif.
Yes.
That like, even if you're not walking anywhere, there really is a sense of flow here. Yes. It's pretty incredible.
Well, there's a really interesting a quote from Van Gogh, and he says, "Music is liquid architecture. Architecture is liquid music."
Yeah.
One way or the other. You might want to look that up.
I will.
So lastly, one of the things that we love to do is we play hide and seek in this house. And I'll just tell you my favorite hiding place.
Yeah,
I got my brother, and I wanted to check. I don't know how. My brother was tiny. He was a little pipsqueak. He is still kind of small. So he used to back into this little room, this little compartment here, and he would hide. It is tiny. But he could scoop in there and fit.
Your brother could fit in here.
He went butt in first and went in there.
That's
it was amazing. And we did look in. We have a hamper that goes from the top floor down the third floor, and we contemplated that, but he was a little too small.
All right, is there any place else, anything in particular that you think is cool, or little details you want to share with us while we're here?
So one of the other things that was fascinating, I'm not sure if they have it the same way. So these all had little pull strings. Okay, now they're all wired. And then these are planters. And even when I was doing my research, Frank Lloyd Wright specified exactly what color flowers had to be put into these planters. He said they have to be white flowers. And when we lived here, there was like a little pull switch. I have a picture of it, and you can turn on the light bulbs. And these whole compartments are on wheels right here.
Wow.
And you can pull out, it makes it very easy to pull out the leaves. And I think there are 6 other leaves that you can put into this table. And the reason that these are on the side, these light up, is because Frank Lloyd Wright didn't like to have centerpieces and really impact and conversation between the people. So.
Wow. So,
I can show you the pantry. I mean the laundry chute.
Absolutely.
Real quick. And then I'll.
So one thing that I think is that I would also be curious about is after we check it.
The laundry. It goes all the way from the top. Just
Okay.
real quick. That's the laundry chute right here. So it goes all the way up. So and then down there,
Oh my god.
all the way into the basement. We used it all the time. You don't want to put a kid in there.
Well, right. Not so much.
Which I was tempted to put my brother down there a few times.
Yes, I'm sure. So one thing I am definitely curious to know is, as I'm, not that I'm old, I'm not, but as I'm getting older, your perspective on life changes. Like, I'm a new homeowner. I know what that means to have a home now. What was your favorite room in the house growing up, and what is it now? Is it still here?
Well, this one was the most spectacular room in the house by far. But when we lived here, the front porch was enclosed, and we used to have a fish pond that was built into the floor. It was not original, but it was done in the 1920s. So when we lived here, it had been there for a long time, and we had. It had like a little pagoda, and it had a little water fountain. You can turn it with a key, and we had 3 fish lived in there, and we named them Frank, Lloyd, and Wright.
Perfect.
And we used to catch flies in the walls, and we were pretty good at it. We'd throw them in there, and the biggest one, Frank, would always catch them and eat them. So that was my favorite.